Welcome to Last Minute Lecture. This free chapter overview is designed to help students review and understand key concepts. These summaries supplement, not replace, the original textbook and may not be redistributed or resold. For complete coverage, always consult the official text. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are mastering Chapter 7 of your Physical Examination and Health Assessment text.
And this is a big one: family violence and human trafficking.
It is. Welcome to a very special tutoring-style deep dive. If you are a college nursing student listening to this right now, maybe you're community clinicals or just prepping for an upcoming exam, consider us your personal clinical guides.
Exactly. You are the third person in the room with us today.
And our mission is simple. We're walking through the exact sequence of the chapter material, from foundational concepts all the way to objective physical findings, so you are fully prepared to recognize the signs of abuse and provide safe patient care.
We are so glad you're here. And while this is undeniably heavy material, it really is. Understanding both the what and the why of these assessments is one of the most vital skills a nurse can develop.
Absolutely.
You're learning how to actively recognize these signs and intervene. You are often the first line of defense.
So let's start by framing the sheer scope of the issue. The text gives us some startling statistics that they instantly grab your attention.
They really do.
1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience intimate partner violence. That's IPV.
And the pediatric numbers are just as heartbreaking. 5 children die every single day from abuse.
5 a day. And for elder abuse, it impacts 1 in 10 people over the age of 60. So you will see this. Let's break down IPV first.
Right. So intimate partner violence is categorized into 4 main areas. The first is physical violence, the use of force.
The one people usually think of first.
Exactly. But there's also sexual violence, which is any attempted or completed sex act without consent. Then stalking.
Unwanted attention causing fear.
Yes. And finally, psychological aggression. Emotional abuse used to exert control.
And we really need to emphasize for your adolescent rotations, teen dating violence is a huge part of this. The text notes it affects over 25% of girls and 15% of boys before age 18.
It's incredibly prevalent.
Plus, we have modern cyber abuse to consider now, too.
That 24/7 access through devices makes it relentless. Moving on to child and elder abuse, we have to talk about neglect. For children, neglect is actually the most common form of maltreatment.
Just failing to provide for basic needs.
Right, along with physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Now, elder abuse mirrors those, but with a unique addition.
Financial exploitation.
Yes. And here is a critical point from the text. In nearly 60% of elder abuse cases, the perpetrator is a family member.
Wow. 60%. So the abuser might be sitting right there in the exam room with you.
Often they are. Which brings us to your nursing responsibility. As a healthcare provider, you are a mandatory reporter.
I want to highlight that. Mandatory reporter.
It means you only need a suspicion of child or elder abuse to report it. You don't need absolute proof, just a suspicion.
That is such a vital legal shield. Now let's transition to a silent epidemic, human trafficking.
It's heavily misunderstood.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
A surprising fact from the chapter Trafficking does not require the movement of people from one place to another.
That's a huge misconception. People think it means smuggling across borders.
Right. But it's really about coercion for labor or commercial sex.
And if a commercial sex act involves a minor, this is an absolute rule, it is always considered human trafficking.
Even without coercion.
Regardless of coercion, because a minor cannot legally consent. It's trafficking, period.
Okay, let's talk about the health effects of all this violence. What is the physical toll on the body?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the effects go way beyond immediate injuries.
Like beyond the traumatic brain injuries or fractures.
Exactly. We are talking systemic consequences.
Yeah.
Abuse victims suffer significantly more chronic issues: cardiovascular problems, gastrointestinal disorders, immune system depression.
Because their bodies are just flooded with stress hormones constantly.
Yes. And severe mental health struggles, PTSD, suicidality, substance abuse.
And for children, the impact is even more terrifying because they were still developing. The trauma actually alters their physical development, right?
It does. It leads to improper brain development and delayed language. And looking long term, it increases the risk of chronic diseases and even criminal behavior in adulthood.
It just echoes for decades.
Yeah.
So what complicates these situations? There are major societal barriers to care mentioned in the text.
Poverty is a massive one.
Yeah, and marginalized communities might fear racism within the healthcare system itself, plus legal status.
Undocumented victims face a horrific choice: seek help and risk deportation, or stay in the abuse.
But the chapter mentions VIWA, the Violence Against Women Act. That provides legal protections for immigrant survivors, which is so important for nurses to know.
It gives them a pathway to safety. But speaking of diverse populations, I have to issue a crucial clinical warning for everyone listening.
Oh, about cultural competence.
Yes. You must differentiate between abuse and cultural healing practices.
Right. The text has great visual evidence of this. Coining and cupping.
Exactly. Those practices leave distinct bruises or red marks, but they are intended to heal or draw out illness. They are not child abuse.
Mistaking cupping for abuse destroys trust instantly.
It absolutely does.
Another vulnerability the text flags is SGM, or sexual and gender minority, youth. They account for 40% of unhoused and runaway youth.
Which is a staggering overrepresentation.
It is. And they are 3 to 7 times more likely to engage in survival sex just to get food or shelter.
And traffickers know this. They explicitly target them by offering false emotional or economic support.
It's predatory. Okay, so we've covered the concepts. Let's get into the practical application. Documentation principles.
This is where your charting has to be flawless.
Verbatim notes.
Verbatim.
Yeah.
Do not sanitize the patient's words.
So if a victim says their partner threatened them and uses a bunch of intense curse words,
you document the curses exactly as they said them in quotation marks. That verbatim record is crucial for future court proceedings.
And what about photographic evidence? Taking pictures of injuries?
Digital photography rules are strict. For cognitively intact adults, you always get prior written consent.
But what if they come in unconscious?
If they are unconscious or cognitively impaired, taking photos without consent is considered ethically sound. You are acting to protect a victim who can't protect themselves.
That makes sense. Now, Table 7.1 in the text goes over forensic terminology. This is a big area where people use the wrong words.
All the time. Let's walk through it. A bruise is clinically called a contusion.
Bleeding under the skin, but the skin isn't broken.
Right. Now, a cut is an incision. It means it was made by a sharp edge.
Like a knife.
Yes. But a laceration, and people misuse this constantly, a laceration is an avulsion or tearing of tissue from blunt impact.
So a blunt tear, not a sharp slice.
Exactly. And finally, petechiae. These are perfectly round, non-raised, purplish red spots.
Often from minor capillary hemorrhage.
Yes. Very important to document accurately.
All right, let's move to subjective data. The interview and screening. The USPSTF has guidelines on this.
They recommend screening all women of childbearing age, which they define as 14 to 46 for IPV.
But the text notes a broader best practice for bedside nurses.
Yes, as a best practice, you should screen every patient. Treat everyone equally, regardless of gender or ethnicity.
Because men are victims, older women are victims. Universal screening removes the bias.
Completely.
For IPV screening, the text breaks down the HITS tool. HITS, hurt, insult, threaten, scream.
It's very straightforward. You ask how often their partner does those 4 things.
And how is it scored?
From 0 to 5 for each question. If the total score is greater than 10, that indicates IPV.
Okay, and for elder abuse, we use the ESI tool, the Elder Abuse Suspicion Index.
This one has a really unique structure. It's 6 questions total.
5 for the patient, right?
Yes. You ask the patient directly about things like reliance on others, being shamed, or if they were forced to sign papers.
And the 6th question.
The 6th is an observational question answered by you, the practitioner. Did you notice poor eye contact or hygiene issues?
I love that it forces the nurse to combine the patient's history with their own clinical observation. What about interviewing children? That seems so difficult.
The golden rule there, always separate the child from the suspected abuser for the interview.
Always. They won't talk if the abuser's staring at them.
Exactly. And keep in mind, children over 11 can generally provide a history at the level of most adults.
But you have to watch for developmental delays.
Yes, delayed children are at a much higher risk for abuse.
So what does this all mean when we move to objective data? The physical exam. I want to debunk a massive misconception right now.
The bruise dating.
Yes. Historically, people thought they could tell exactly how old a bruise was by its color.
But the text explicitly states that dating a bruise by its color is only about 50% accurate.
It's a coin toss.
Right. So you document the size, the color, and the pattern.
Yeah.
But never, ever guess the timing or the weapon based solely on the color.
Just document what you see. Now, for infants, there is a critical clinical pearl regarding bruising.
This is a big one. Accidental bruising in healthy, active children is common. Kids run and fall.
But infants?
Infants who are not yet walking or cruising typically should not have bruises.
They just aren't mobile enough to hurt themselves like that.
Exactly. Any bruise on an infant younger than 9 months is a major red flag.
And suspicious areas on any child include the torso, ears, neck, and buttocks.
Yes, and if you see those, you might need to initiate radiologic surveys, skeletal surveys, to look for occult fractures in various stages of healing.
Table 7.2 covers abusive burn patterns, which is just gut-wrenching but so necessary to know.
Very necessary.
It describes immersion injuries.
Yeah.
This is when a child is held down in hot water, causing glove or sock burns.
The distinct feature there is a clear line of demarcation, and cruelly, it spares the flexor creases.
Because the child bends their joints in pain, protecting those creases from the water.
It's undeniable. And then you have pattern burns.
Where the burn is the distinct shape of the object, like a hot iron or fork tines or cigarette burns in various stages of healing.
Finding those is a clear indicator of abuse.
Briefly, for elder abuse, what objective labs are we looking at for baselines?
You'll want a CBC, a metabolic panel, a coagulation panel to check for underlying bleeding issues, and a UA.
And for human trafficking victims.
Alongside those, comprehensive STI and pregnancy screening.
Okay, we are entering the final, highly critical tool in the chapter, the danger assessment for IPV.
This is literally a lifesaver.
It assesses homicide risk. It's a two-part tool. First, a calendar to map the frequency and severity of violence over the past year.
It helps the victim visually see how things have escalated.
And the second part is a 20-item yes or no questionnaire.
This raises an important question. What makes a situation instantly more lethal?
The text has a chilling statistic on this.
In an IPV relationship, the presence of a gun increases the risk of homicide by 500%.
500%.
The more yes answers on that danger assessment, especially regarding guns or violent jealousy, the higher the danger. That is why routine assessment is critical.
It really is. We've covered the foundational concepts, the screening tools, the objective findings. You have the knowledge now.
You do. And as we finish up this tutoring session, I want you to consider one final thought.
A clinical challenge.
Think about the routine, structured steps of your nursing assessment. Simply looking under a patient's sock or universally asking that standardized screening question.
It feels routine to us.
But that simple act might be the only interruption in a cycle of violence that a victim ever encounters. You aren't just filling out charts. You are the safety net.
That is exactly why we do this. Keep studying, trust your training, and remember your impact. That's all for today's deep dive. A warm thank you from the Last Minute Lecture team for your dedication to safe patient care.